They said marrying the Duke of Ravenscar was a death sentence. 20-year-old Eliza Hartwell stood at the altar beside a man the entire realm called a monster, Darian Blackthorne, the Duke who ruined rivals, fought duels at dawn, and left broken hearts scattered across 3 counties. Society had warned her. Strangers had begged her to flee. Even her own mother had wept the night before. But as winter light sliced through the cathedral windows and Darian's storm-gray eyes met hers for the first time, Eliza made a choice that would shatter everything she thought she knew about fear, truth, and the man they called irredeemable. Stay until the end to see how one woman's courage rewrites a legacy. Drop a like and tell us what city you're watching from. The letter arrived on the coldest morning of the year. Eliza Hartwell sat in the drawing room of Hartwell Manor, a faded estate that had once been the pride of the western counties, but now barely held together under peeling paint and mounting debts. Her father, Lord Edmund Hartwell, had tried to hide the worst of it. The servants let go one by one, the furniture sold off piece by piece, the creditors who came knocking with increasing frequency. But Eliza wasn't blind. She'd watched their world crumble for 3 years, ever since the failed investments that had destroyed her father's fortune. She was reading when her father entered, his face pale and drawn, holding a sealed envelope bearing a crest she didn't recognize. A raven perched atop a blackthorn branch, rendered in silver wax. "Eliza," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She set down her book. Something in his voice made her chest tighten. He crossed to the window, staring out at the frost-covered gardens. "I've received a proposal, a marriage proposal, on your behalf." Eliza's breath caught. "From whom?" Her father didn't turn around. "The Duke of Ravenscar." The name landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of dread through the room. Eliza stood slowly. "Darian Blackthorne?" "Yes." "The man they call the Devil Duke?" Her father finally turned to face her, and the guilt in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. "I had no choice, Eliza. The debts, they're crushing us. Without this alliance, we'll lose everything. The estate, the title, our family name. Everything your grandfather built will be gone." Eliza's mind reeled. She'd heard the stories about Darian Blackthorne since she was a girl. Everyone had. The Duke of Ravenscar was a legend whispered about in drawing rooms and taverns alike. A man of savage reputation who'd fought 17 duels before his 25th birthday, who'd bankrupted rivals over personal slights, who kept a string of mistresses and discarded them without a second thought. They said he'd killed a man in cold blood over a gambling dispute. They said he drove his first fiancée to madness. They said anyone foolish enough to cross him ended up ruined or dead. "Father," she whispered, "you can't be serious." "The Duke made a generous offer," her father said, his voice hollow. "More than generous. He'll settle all our debts, restore the estate, and provide an income for your mother and sisters. In exchange—" He trailed off. "In exchange for me." He flinched. "It's an arranged marriage, Eliza. They're not uncommon among families desperate enough to sell their daughters to monsters." The words came out sharper than she intended, but her father didn't argue. He simply stood there, a broken man who'd run out of options. Eliza turned away, her hands trembling. She walked to the window and stared out at the frozen landscape. In the distance, she could see her younger sisters playing in the snow, laughing and chasing each other without a care in the world. They were 12 and 14. Too young to understand how close they were to losing everything. "When?" she asked quietly. "The Duke wishes to marry within the month." "A month?" 4 weeks to prepare herself to wed a man whose very name made grown men nervous. "And if I refuse?" Her father's silence was answer enough. Eliza closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, who'd already sacrificed so much, her sisters, who deserved a chance at decent marriages of their own, the servants who'd stayed loyal even when the wages dried up, the legacy of Hartwell Manor, 6 generations old. She thought of herself, 20 years old, well-read, capable, and utterly trapped. "I'll do it," she said. Her father exhaled, relief and shame warring in his expression. "Eliza? But I want to meet him first, before the wedding. I want to see the man I'm being sold to." Her father nodded. "I'll arrange it." The Duke of Ravenscar arrived at Hartwell Manor 3 days later, and the entire household fell into chaos. Servants who hadn't been seen in weeks suddenly reappeared to scrub floors and polish silver. Eliza's mother emerged from her rooms wearing her finest dress, which she'd carefully mended to hide the worn spots. Even her sisters were pressed into service, arranging flowers and setting out the best china they had left. Eliza stood in her bedroom while her lady's maid, Anne, helped her into a pale blue gown. "They say he's handsome," Anne whispered as she laced up the back. "Despite everything else." "They say a lot of things," Eliza replied. "They say he once shot a man at dawn for insulting his horse. That's ridiculous. They say he keeps a private apartment in London where he entertains actresses and opera singers. And they say his own father was afraid of him." Eliza spun around. "That's enough." Anne bit her lip, immediately contrite. "I'm sorry, miss. I just worry about you." Eliza softened. Anne had been with her since childhood, more friend than servant. "I know, but spreading rumors won't help." "What if the rumors are true?" That was the question that had kept Eliza awake for 3 nights straight. What if everything they said about Darian Blackthorne was true? What if she was walking into a nightmare she'd never escape? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "He's here!" her father called. "Eliza, please come down." She took a deep breath, checked her reflection one last time, and descended the stairs. The Duke of Ravenscar stood in the drawing room with his back to her, examining a portrait on the wall. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders encased in a perfectly tailored black coat. His dark hair was slightly too long, brushing his collar in a way that suggested he didn't much care about current fashion. Her father cleared his throat. "Your Grace, may I present my daughter, Miss Eliza Hartwell?" The Duke turned. Eliza's breath caught. They'd said he was handsome, but that word didn't do him justice. Darian Blackthorne had the kind of face that belonged in oil paintings. Strong jawline, high cheekbones, a mouth set in a firm line that suggested he rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that struck her most. Storm gray and piercing, they seemed to look straight through her, cataloging everything in a single glance. This was not the wild, reckless monster she'd imagined. This was something more dangerous. A predator in perfect control. "Miss Hartwell," he said, his voice deep and measured. He bowed slightly, the gesture impeccably polite. She curtsied. "Your Grace." An awkward silence filled the room. Her father shifted nervously. "Perhaps you two would like to speak privately? I can—" "That would be acceptable," the Duke said, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. Her father practically fled the room. Eliza stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated despite the way her heart hammered in her chest. The Duke circled her slowly, like a collector examining a new acquisition. "You're younger than I expected," he said. "I'm 20. Practically a child." Her temper flared. "Old enough to know when I'm being insulted." For the first time, something flickered in those gray eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or surprise. "You have spirit. Good. You'll need it." "Is that a threat, Your Grace?" "An observation, Miss Hartwell." He stopped in front of her. "I imagine you've heard things about me. I imagine the entire kingdom has heard things about you. And you believe them?" Eliza met his gaze steadily. "I believe a man doesn't earn a reputation like yours without cause." He smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. How refreshingly honest. Most women pretend they haven't heard the stories. They simper and flutter and pretend I'm some romantic hero. I'm not most women. "No," he agreed. "I don't think you are." He turned and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he was silent. "I won't lie to you, Miss Hartwell," he said finally. "This marriage is a business arrangement. Your father needs money. I need respectability. A wife from a good family, a stable household, an heir eventually. That's all I require from you." "How romantic." He glanced back at her. "Did you expect romance?" "I expected honesty. You're providing that, at least." "I am many terrible things," the Duke said quietly, "but I am not a liar." Eliza studied him, trying to reconcile the cold, controlled man before her with the stories of violent duels and ruined reputations. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have any number of desperate families. Why the Hartwells? Your father's title is old and respected, despite his current financial troubles. Your bloodline is impeccable. And he hesitated. And? And you're not connected to London society. You don't attend the balls and gossip circles. That makes you safer. Safer for whom? For both of us. Before she could ask what he meant, her father returned, looking anxious. Your Grace, might I offer you refreshment? We have— No need, Lord Hartwell. I've seen what I came to see. The Duke turned to Eliza. I'll send the marriage contracts tomorrow. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks at Ravenscar Cathedral. My household staff will make all the arrangements. 3 weeks? Eliza's mother, who'd been hovering in the hallway, appeared in the doorway. But, Your Grace, that's hardly enough time to— It's sufficient, Lady Hartwell. I prefer to conclude my business efficiently. He bowed to Eliza. Until the wedding, Miss Hartwell. And then he was gone, striding out of Hartwell Manor and into a waiting carriage without a backward glance. Eliza's mother rushed to her side. What did he say? Was he terrible? Oh, my dear girl. But Eliza barely heard her. She was still staring at the door where the Duke had vanished, her mind churning with questions. The man she'd just met was nothing like the monster from the stories. He was controlled, intelligent, clearly calculating. But beneath that icy exterior, she'd sensed something else. Something guarded and wounded, like a fortress built to keep the world at bay. What are you hiding, Darian Blackthorne? The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations that Eliza had almost no part in. True to his word, the Duke's household staff descended on Hartwell Manor with military precision. They brought fabric for her wedding dress, jewels for her trousseau, and endless lists of what would be required for the ceremony. Eliza felt like a doll being dressed and positioned with no say in her own fate. The Duke himself did not visit again. Instead, he sent letters, brief formal notes about practical matters. The wedding would be at 2 o'clock. She would travel to Ravenscar Manor the night before to prepare. Her family would be accommodated in the guest wing. Everything was laid out with the cold efficiency of a military campaign. But it was the other letters that troubled Eliza, the ones that arrived from strangers. The first came from a woman who signed herself only as a friend. Miss Hartwell, I beg you to reconsider this marriage. The Duke of Ravenscar is not what he seems. I was once in your position, and I barely escaped with my life. He is cruel, possessive, and dangerous. Please, for your own sake, flee while you still can. Eliza had burned that letter, refusing to let it poison her thoughts. But more came. A young nobleman named Lord Ashford wrote to warn her that the Duke had driven his previous fiancée to flee the country in terror. A merchant claimed the Duke had ruined his business over a personal grudge. An elderly woman insisted she'd seen the Duke strike a servant in public. Each letter added to the growing sense of dread that settled over Eliza like a shroud. They're trying to frighten you, Anne said one evening as she brushed Eliza's hair. Jealous rivals, probably. Or people who owe him money. Or people telling the truth, Eliza whispered. Anne's hand stilled. You don't have to go through with this, miss. We could run away. I have cousins in Scotland. We could— And condemn my family to ruin? My sisters to poverty? No, Anne. I made my choice. But if he's truly as dangerous as they say, then I'll deal with it when the time comes. Anne set down the brush and met Eliza's eyes in the mirror. You're braver than I could ever be. Eliza smiled sadly. I'm not brave, Anne. I'm just out of options. The night before the wedding, Eliza arrived at Ravenscar Manor. The estate was enormous, a sprawling Gothic fortress perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. Dark stone walls rose against a gray sky, and bare trees lined the long drive like skeletal sentinels. As their carriage approached, Eliza felt as if she were entering a prison. The Duke met them at the entrance, flanked by a small army of servants. He looked exactly as he had 3 weeks ago, immaculate, controlled, and utterly unreadable. Lord Hartwell, Lady Hartwell, he greeted her parents. Welcome to Ravenscar. He turned to Eliza. Miss Hartwell? Your Grace. He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the strength in the muscles beneath his coat sleeve. He led them into a grand entrance hall dominated by a massive chandelier and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Your rooms are prepared, he told her parents. My housekeeper, Mrs. Graves, will show you the way." An older woman with iron gray hair and a severe expression stepped forward. "If you'll follow me, Lord and Lady Hartwell." After her parents were led away, the Duke turned to Eliza. "I'll show you to your chambers." He guided her up a sweeping staircase and down a long corridor lined with more portraits. Eliza studied them as they walked, generations of Blackthorns, all with the same piercing eyes and aristocratic features. "Your ancestors," she said. "Yes. They look formidable. That's a polite word for it." He stopped at a set of double doors and pushed them open, revealing a suite of rooms that took Eliza's breath away. The bedroom was enormous, decorated in shades of deep blue and silver, with a four-poster bed, a sitting area, and windows that overlooked the sea. "These are yours," the Duke said. "My chambers are next door, connected by that door." He nodded toward a door she hadn't noticed. "But it will remain locked unless you wish otherwise." Eliza turned to him, surprised. We're not... I don't force women into my bed, Miss Hartwell, despite what you may have heard." His expression was unreadable. "This marriage is a formality. You'll have your own space, your own life. All I ask is that you appear at my side for social functions and provide me with an heir when the time comes. Beyond that, you're free to do as you please." It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like another wall between them. "What if I want more than that?" she heard herself ask. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or hope, but it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "Then we'll discuss it," he said quietly. "But don't expect love, Eliza. I'm not capable of it." He left before she could respond, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Eliza stood alone in her beautiful prison and wondered what kind of man would arrange a marriage with so little expectation of happiness. "What happened to you, Darian Blackthorn? What turned you into this?" The wedding took place the next afternoon in Ravenscar Cathedral, a massive stone structure that had stood for 400 years. Eliza walked down the aisle on her father's arm, wearing a gown of white silk and lace that the Duke's seamstresses had created. The cathedral was full of faces she didn't recognize, members of high society who'd come to witness the scandal of the season. She could hear them whispering, "Poor girl. She has no idea what she's getting into. Give it 6 months before she flees like the last one." Eliza kept her head high and her eyes fixed on the altar, where Darian Blackthorn waited in black formal wear, looking like a dark angel. When she reached him, he took her hand and she felt a shock at the contact. His fingers were warm, despite his cold demeanor. The priest began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the cathedral. Eliza barely heard the words. She was too focused on the man beside her, trying to understand the contradiction he represented. "Do you, Darian Blackthorn, Duke of Ravenscar, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Eliza Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She hesitated for just a moment, aware that this was her last chance to walk away. Then she thought of her family, her sisters, the debt that would crush them all. "I do," the priest smiled. "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Your grace, you may kiss your bride." Darian turned to her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw uncertainty in his eyes, as if he didn't know how she'd react. Slowly, carefully, he leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief, formal, and absolutely terrifying. Because in that moment, Eliza realized something that made her blood run cold. The Duke of Ravenscar wasn't a monster at all. He was a man in so much pain that he'd built walls to keep everyone out. And she'd just married him. The wedding breakfast was held at Ravenscar Manor, a lavish affair that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration. Eliza sat at the head table beside her new husband, smiling politely as guest after guest offered congratulations that sounded more like condolences. She noticed how carefully people watched Darian, as if waiting for him to do something scandalous. He played his part perfectly, the cold, controlled Duke who'd acquired a pretty young wife as one might acquire a new horse. He spoke little, smiled never, and kept one hand possessively on Eliza's arm as if to mark his claim. It was a performance, she realized. Every gesture, every word carefully calculated to maintain the reputation he'd built. But why? "Your Grace," A woman's voice interrupted her thoughts. Eliza looked up to see a strikingly beautiful woman in a crimson gown approaching their table. She had raven black hair and dark eyes that glittered with malice. "Lady Cordelia," Darian said, his tone flat. "I simply had to congratulate you on your marriage," Lady Cordelia said, her smile sharp as a knife. "Such a surprising choice." "Meaning?" Eliza asked coolly. Lady Cordelia turned to her, and Eliza felt the full weight of her contempt. "Meaning, my dear, that a man like the Duke usually prefers women with more experience. But I suppose innocence has its own appeal." Darian's hand tightened on Eliza's arm. "That's enough, Cordelia." "Is it?" Lady Cordelia leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only Eliza could hear. "Ask him about Catherine, darling. Ask him what really happened to his first fiancée. Then we'll see how innocent you feel." She swept away in a rustle of crimson silk, leaving Eliza cold. "Who is Catherine?" Eliza asked quietly. Darian's expression shuddered. "No one. She's someone, or that woman wouldn't have mentioned her. It's in the past, Eliza. Leave it there." But Eliza couldn't. Not when that name had been wielded like a weapon. The reception dragged on for hours. By the time the guests finally departed, Eliza was exhausted, emotionally, physically, mentally. Darian escorted her to her chambers. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll discuss the household arrangements tomorrow." He turned to leave, but Eliza caught his arm. "Wait." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. "I know this isn't what either of us wanted," Eliza said carefully, "but we're married now. We're going to be living together, probably for the rest of our lives. Can we at least try to be, civil? Honest with each other?" Something in his expression softened, just slightly. "Honesty is a dangerous thing in my world, Eliza. More dangerous than the lies people are telling about you?" He stared at her for a long moment, and she held her breath, wondering if she'd pushed too far. "Ask me one question," he said finally. "One honest question, and I'll give you one honest answer." Eliza thought carefully. There were so many things she wanted to know, about his reputation, his past, the rumors that swirled around him. But in the end, she asked the question that mattered most. "Do you want this marriage to work?" Darian's eyes searched hers. "I don't know if I'm capable of making it work, but I don't want to hurt you, Eliza. That much is true." It wasn't a declaration of love or even hope, but it was honest, and somehow that mattered more. "Then that's enough," she said quietly. "For now." He nodded once, then disappeared into his own chambers, leaving Eliza alone with her thoughts. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into the enormous bed, staring up at the canopy. Outside, she could hear the wind howling off the sea, battering against the ancient stone walls of Ravenscar Manor. She was the Duchess of Ravenscar now, married to a man everyone feared, living in a fortress that felt more like a tomb than a home. But as she drifted off to sleep, she thought about the way Darian's hand had trembled slightly when he'd kissed her at the altar, the way his eyes had flickered with something like hope when she'd asked if he wanted the marriage to work. Maybe the Duke of Ravenscar was a monster, or maybe he was just a man who'd been hurt so badly that he'd forgotten how to be anything else. Either way, Eliza had made a vow, and she was going to keep it, no matter how many warnings, whispers, or dangerous truths stood in her way. Eliza woke to the sound of rain lashing against the windows. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. The wedding, the whispers, Lady Cordelia's venomous words. She sat up in the massive bed, alone in a room that still felt like it belonged to someone else. A soft knock at the door made her start. "Come in," she called, pulling the covers up to her chin. A young maid entered carrying a breakfast tray. She had copper-colored hair and kind eyes, and she curtsied nervously. "Good morning, Your Grace. I'm Mary. Mrs. Graves assigned me to be your lady's maid." "Where's Anne?" Eliza asked. Anne had traveled with her from Hartwell Manor. Mary's expression flickered with something like pity. "The Duke's orders, Your Grace. He said you needed someone familiar with Ravenscar's ways. Your previous maid has been given other duties." The first act of control. Eliza felt anger flare in her chest, but she forced it down. "Pick your battles," she told herself. "Thank you, Mary," You can set the tray there. Mary placed the breakfast on a small table by the window, then hesitated. Your Grace, if I may, there's talk below stairs. About the Duke, about what kind of man he is. I'm sure there is. They say he's dangerous, that he has a terrible temper when provoked. Eliza met the girl's eyes. And what do you think, Mary? You work here. You must have seen him. Mary bit her lip. I think he's a man with secrets, and secrets make people afraid. Wise words for someone so young. I'm 19, Your Grace, old enough to know that fear and truth aren't always the same thing. She curtsied again. Ring if you need anything. After Mary left, Eliza ate her breakfast and dressed in a simple day gown, refusing to wait for assistance. She needed to take control of something, even if it was just putting on her own clothes. She was pinning up her hair when the connecting door to Darian's chambers opened. He stood in the doorway, already dressed for the day in dark trousers and a white shirt, his hair still damp from washing. Without his formal coat, he looked younger, less intimidating. I thought you said that door would remain locked, Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. I knocked. You didn't hear me. That doesn't give you the right to simply walk in. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. You're right. I apologize. He started to retreat, but she stopped him. Wait, since you're here, we should talk. About the household. About expectations. Darian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What do you want to know? Everything, how this house runs, what my duties are, what you expect from me beyond appearing at social functions. There are no duties, Eliza. You're the Duchess of Ravenscar. The staff will handle everything. So I'm to do nothing, sit in this beautiful prison and be decorative? His jaw tightened. It's not a prison. Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I've traded one cage for another. At least at Hartwell Manor, I had purpose. I managed the household accounts, oversaw the staff, took care of my sisters. Here, I have nothing. You have freedom, Darian said quietly. More than most women in your position. You have your own income, your own rooms, the ability to come and go as you please. That's more than my mother ever had. The mention of his mother made Eliza pause. What happened to her? The shutters came down over his expression. That's not a conversation for this morning. When then? We're married, Darian. We can't avoid difficult conversations forever. Watch me. He turned to leave, but Eliza crossed the room and grabbed his arm. He froze, staring down at her hand on his sleeve. I asked you last night if you wanted this marriage to work, she said. You said you didn't want to hurt me. Well, shutting me out hurts. Treating me like a stranger in my own home hurts. So either be honest with me or admit that you lied. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he placed his hand over hers. My mother died 5 years ago, he said, his voice carefully neutral. She was unhappy for a very long time, and I couldn't save her. The pain in those words was so raw that Eliza's anger evaporated. I'm sorry, she said softly. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He gently removed her hand from his arm. I have business to attend to this morning. We'll discuss household matters later. He disappeared back into his chambers, leaving Eliza standing alone, her heart aching for the man who clearly carried wounds he refused to let anyone see. The next few days fell into an uneasy pattern. Darian was polite but distant, treating Eliza with the same cool courtesy he might show a business associate. They took meals together when his schedule allowed, making stilted conversation about neutral topics, the weather, the estate, books she was reading. He never touched her beyond the occasional formal gesture, never stayed in a room with her longer than necessary. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like slow suffocation. Eliza tried to find her place in the household, but everywhere she turned, she felt the weight of suspicion and pity. The servants were respectful but wary, as if waiting for something terrible to happen. Mrs. Graves, the housekeeper, ran the estate with iron efficiency and made it clear that the Duchess's input was neither needed nor wanted. Even the grounds offered no escape. Ravenscar Manor sat on a windswept cliff, surrounded by dark forests and rocky beaches. It was beautiful in a savage way, but also isolated. The nearest village was 5 miles away, accessible only by a treacherous coastal road. On the fourth morning of her marriage, Eliza was exploring the manor's extensive library when she found a section of books that made her blood run cold. They were newspapers, carefully preserved and bound by year, and every single one contained articles about Darian Blackthorne. Duke of Ravenscar wins 17th duel. Blackthorne's business rival declares bankruptcy. Lady Catherine Ashford flees to continent. Duke of Ravenscar blamed. That last headline made her hands shake. Lady Catherine Ashford. So she was real, not just a weapon wielded by Lady Cordelia. Eliza pulled down the volume and began to read. The article was 3 years old. It described how Lady Catherine Ashford, daughter of an earl and engaged to the Duke of Ravenscar, had broken off the engagement and fled to France the week before their wedding. Rumors swirled about abuse, cruelty, even attempted murder. The Duke had refused to comment, which only fueled the speculation. Fascinating reading material for a new bride. Eliza spun around to find Darian standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I was just investigating your husband's past? I don't blame you. He walked into the library, hands in his pockets. Find anything interesting? Eliza closed the newspaper volume. Who was Catherine Ashford? A mistake. That's not an answer. Darian crossed to the window, staring out at the storm-tossed sea. Catherine was young, beautiful, from a good family. Everything a duke should want in a wife. We were engaged for 6 months. What happened? She realized what everyone else already knew, that marrying me would destroy her. So she ran. Smart girl. Did you love her? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I told you, Eliza, I'm not capable of love. Catherine understood that eventually. The question is, when will you? Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. A moment later, Mrs. Graves appeared, looking agitated. Your Grace, there's a visitor. He insists on seeing you immediately. Darian frowned. Who? Lord Ashford, Your Grace. The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Darian's expression went completely blank. Show him to my study. Eliza, go to your rooms. I will not. If this concerns Catherine, it doesn't concern you. I'm your wife. Everything about you concerns me now. They stared at each other, a battle of wills playing out in silence. Finally, Darian exhaled sharply. Fine, but stay quiet and let me handle this. He strode out of the library, and Eliza followed, her heart pounding. Lord Ashford was waiting in Darian's study, a man in his early 30s with sandy hair and eyes filled with barely controlled rage. When he saw Eliza, his expression twisted with disgust. So it's true, he said. You found another victim. Darian positioned himself between Ashford and Eliza. State your business and leave, Ashford. You're not welcome here. Not welcome? You destroyed my sister, and I'm not welcome? Lord Ashford took a step forward. Catherine still wakes up screaming because of you. She can't bear to be in the same room with a man. She'll never marry, never have a normal life. And now you've trapped this poor girl. That's enough, Darian said, his voice dangerously quiet. Is it? Does she know what you did? Does she know how you... Get out. Make me, Blackthorne. Or better yet, challenge me to a duel. Add another body to your collection. The tension in the room was suffocating. Eliza saw Darian's hands clench into fists, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. But when he spoke, his voice was ice. If I wanted you dead, Ashford, you'd be dead already. But I don't make war on fools. Now leave my house before I have you thrown out. You haven't heard the last of this, Ashford spat. He turned to Eliza, and something like pity crossed his face. Get out while you still can, Your Grace, before it's too late. He stormed out, leaving a horrible silence in his wake. Eliza stared at her husband, at the rigid set of his shoulders, and the carefully controlled fury radiating from him. What did he mean? She asked quietly. What did you do to Catherine? Nothing. That's not an answer, Darian. It's the only answer you're getting. He moved to the sideboard and poured himself a drink, downing it in one swallow. This is what your life will be like, Eliza. People coming to tell you I'm a monster. Warnings, accusations, hatred. Still think you can handle it? Eliza crossed the room until she stood directly in front of him. I think I deserve the truth. The truth? Darian laughed bitterly. The truth is that Catherine Ashford was a fragile, sheltered girl who believed every rumor she heard about me. The truth is that on our wedding day, before we even reached the altar, she became hysterical with fear. She locked herself in her room and threatened to jump from the window if anyone came near her. The truth is that I called off the wedding myself because I couldn't bear to see her destroy herself over lies. Then why does her brother think you hurt her? Because the truth isn't as satisfying as the legend. Because it's easier to believe I'm a monster than to admit Catherine's own fear consumed her. He set down his glass with shaking hands. I am many terrible things, Eliza, but I have never harmed a woman. I would die before I did that. The raw pain in his voice made something crack open in Eliza's chest. She reached out and took his hand, half expecting him to pull away. He didn't. I believe you, she said softly. He stared at their joined hands as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Why? Because I've seen you, Darian. The real you, underneath all the armor. And that man wouldn't hurt anyone weaker than himself. For a moment, his fingers tightened around hers. Then he pulled away, retreating behind his walls once more. You're naive, he said. That's going to get you hurt. Or maybe I just see things more clearly than you think. Before he could respond, there was a commotion outside, raised voices, the sound of someone arguing with the staff. Darian cursed under his breath. What now? They found Anne in the entrance hall, red-faced and arguing with two footmen who were trying to escort her out. I have a right to see the Duchess, Anne was shouting. She's my mistress. She needs to know. Anne? Eliza rushed forward. What's wrong? What's happened? Anne broke free of the footman and grabbed Eliza's hands. Your Grace, thank heavens. I had to warn you. There's a woman in the village. She's been telling everyone terrible things about the Duke. She says she used to be his mistress, and he ruined her life. Darian's expression went cold. Who? She calls herself Josephine. She's been in the tavern for 2 days buying drinks for anyone who'll listen to her stories. Stories about what? Eliza asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. Anne glanced at Darian, then back to Eliza. She says the Duke is violent, that he keeps women prisoner, that he killed his own father. The words fell like stones into water, sending ripples of shock through the hall. Eliza looked at Darian. His face had gone completely white, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Get the carriage ready, he told the nearest footman. I'm going to the village. Not alone you're not, Eliza said. This doesn't concern you. Everything about you concerns me. Remember? They stared at each other for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, Darian nodded. Fine. But prepare yourself, Eliza. You're about to see exactly what kind of man you married. The village of Ravenscar was a collection of stone cottages clustered around a harbor, with a single tavern that served as the social hub. By the time their carriage arrived, a crowd had already gathered outside. Darian stepped out first, and the crowd fell silent, faces turning toward him with a mixture of fear and fascination. Eliza climbed down after him, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Where is she? Darian asked, his voice cutting through the silence. An old man pointed toward the tavern. Inside, Your Grace. Been there since noon, she has, telling tales. Darian strode toward the tavern door, and the crowd parted before him like water. Eliza followed, acutely aware of the stares, the whispers. Inside, the tavern was packed, and at the center of the attention sat a woman in a stained silk dress, her beauty faded by drink and hard living, holding court like a queen. And when I told him I wanted to leave, she was saying, he locked me in the tower for a week. No food, no water, just to teach me who was master. She looked up and saw Darian standing in the doorway. Her face went pale, then twisted into something ugly. Well, well, Josephine said loudly. Look who's come to silence me. But it's too late, Your Grace. They all know the truth now. Darian walked slowly toward her, his expression unreadable. The crowd pressed back, giving him space, as if he were a predator moving among prey. Hello, Josephine, he said quietly. How much are they paying you? She laughed, but there was hysteria in it. Paying me? I'm doing this for free. Someone needs to warn these people about you. Someone needs to tell them about the monster in the manor. Then tell them, Darian said. Tell them about the money I gave you when you left. The letters of recommendation I wrote. The coach fare to London. Tell them the truth, Josephine." "The truth?" She stood, swaying slightly. "The truth is that you're a murderer. Everyone knows it. You killed your own father, and you've been hiding it for 5 years." The tavern erupted in whispers. Eliza felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Darian stood perfectly still, his face carved from ice. "Careful, Josephine. Slander is a crime." "Is it slander if it's true?" She turned to the crowd. "His father died under mysterious circumstances. A fall down the stairs, they said. But I was there. I heard the shouting. I saw the Duke standing over the body with blood on his hands." "You saw nothing," Darian said, his voice low and dangerous. "Because you weren't there. You came to my household 6 months after my father died." "You can't prove that." "Actually, I can. I have the employment records. I have witnesses. And I have the letters you sent begging for money after I dismissed you for theft." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This one is particularly interesting. Would you like me to read it aloud?" Josephine's bravado cracked. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Josephine's shoulders sagged, and something in her broke. "They told me you wouldn't fight back," she whispered. "They said you never defend yourself, that you just let the rumors spread because you don't care what anyone thinks." "Who told you that?" Darian asked sharply. "Who paid you to come here?" But Josephine was already backing toward the door, fear replacing her earlier bravado. "I'm leaving. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just supposed to—" She fled before anyone could stop her, disappearing into the darkening evening. Darian turned to face the assembled villagers, his expression terrible in its coldness. "Believe what you want," he said quietly. "You will anyway. But know this. I have never harmed an innocent person. I have never imprisoned anyone. And I did not kill my father." He walked out of the tavern without another word, leaving Eliza standing alone in the stunned silence. She looked at the faces around her, some sympathetic, some skeptical, all confused. "My husband is not a murderer," she heard herself say, "and anyone who spreads such lies will answer to me." She followed Darian outside, finding him standing by the carriage, staring out at the sea. The wind whipped his dark hair around his face, and in the fading light he looked utterly alone. "Darian, don't," he said without turning around. "Don't try to comfort me. Don't tell me it will be all right. You heard what she said. You saw their faces. That's what they think of me. That's what they'll always think." Eliza moved to stand beside him. "Did you kill your father?" He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her heart. "No," he said, "but I wanted to. Every single day of my childhood, I wanted him dead. Does that make me guilty?" "No. It makes you human. You don't know what he was like, what he did to my mother, to me, the things he—" His voice cracked, and he turned away. "I should never have married you. This isn't fair to you." "Life isn't fair, Darian, but we're married now, and I'm not running away like Catherine. I'm not going to let some bitter woman with a grudge destroy what we're building here. We're not building anything. We're barely tolerating each other." "Then maybe it's time we tried for more than tolerance." He stared at her as if she'd suggested they sprout wings and fly. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why are you fighting for this? For me? You don't even know me." "Then let me know you," Eliza said. "Stop hiding behind walls and rumors. Let me see the real Darian Blackthorne." For a moment, she thought he might agree. She saw something soften in his expression, saw his hand start to reach for hers. Then a gunshot cracked through the evening air. The carriage window exploded in a shower of glass. Darian grabbed Eliza and pulled her down, shielding her body with his own, as another shot rang out, splintering the wood above their heads. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. People were screaming, running for cover. Darian pulled Eliza behind the carriage, then peered around the edge, trying to locate the shooter. A third shot hit the ground inches from his feet. "Coward!" he shouted into the darkness. "If you want me dead, face me like a man!" "Your Grace, please," their driver begged. "We need to leave, now." But Darian was already moving, running toward the direction the shots had come from. Eliza watched in horror as he disappeared into the shadows between buildings, chasing a would-be assassin with nothing but his bare hands. She waited in an agony of fear, counting the seconds until he returned. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Darian emerged from the darkness, breathing hard but unharmed. "He's gone," he said. Whoever it was, they had a horse waiting. "You could have been killed," Eliza said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I'm tired of being hunted by cowards." He helped her into the carriage, and they rode back to Ravenscar Manor in tense silence. It wasn't until they were safely inside in his study with a fire roaring in the hearth that Eliza finally let herself react. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold the brandy glass Darian offered her. He took the glass away and wrapped his hands around hers, warming them. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have been there. You could have been hurt. So could you. I'm used to it." Those 3 words broke something inside Eliza. She pulled her hands free and grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "You shouldn't have to be used to it," she said fiercely. "You shouldn't have to live like this, constantly under attack, constantly defending yourself against lies. Someone is orchestrating all of this. Josephine, Lord Ashford, the shooter. Someone wants to destroy you." "I know." "Then we need to find out who and stop them." "We?" Darian's expression was unreadable. "This isn't your fight, Eliza." "Yes, it is, because someone is trying to hurt my husband, and I don't take kindly to that." For the first time since she'd met him, Darian smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding. This was fire and desperation, the kiss of a drowning man reaching for air. Eliza kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darian rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," Eliza agreed. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed, the sound raw and genuine, and pulled her closer. For the first time since their marriage, Eliza felt hope. But that hope shattered the next morning when she woke to find Darian gone and a letter waiting on her bedside table. "Eliza, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way to London. There are things I need to handle, enemies I need to confront. I should have done this years ago, but I was a coward. I let the lies spread because it was easier than fighting back. That ends now. Stay at Ravenscar. Don't come after me. This will get dangerous, and I can't protect you if you're in the middle of it. I know you'll be angry. You have every right to be, but please understand, I'm doing this to keep you safe." Darian Eliza read the letter 3 times, feeling fury build with each word. He'd left her. After everything. After that kiss. After finally letting her in. He'd left her behind like she was just another fragile woman who needed protecting. She crumpled the letter in her fist and made a decision that would change everything. If Darian thought she would sit quietly at Ravenscar while he fought his battles alone, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Eliza was in the stables within the hour, dressed in her riding habit and demanding a horse. "Your Grace, the Duke left strict orders," the stable master began. "The Duke is my husband, not my jailer," Eliza interrupted. "Saddle the fastest horse you have. Now." The man hesitated, clearly torn between his orders and the steel in her voice. Finally, he nodded and brought out a spirited gray mare. "She's fast, Your Grace, but she's temperamental. Are you certain?" "I grew up riding. I can handle her." What Eliza didn't mention was that she'd grown up riding gentle ponies around Hartwell Manor's manicured grounds, not racing horses bred for speed. But she'd be damned if she let Darian face his enemies alone while she cowered at Ravenscar like some porcelain doll. She was mounting when Mary came running from the manor, clutching a cloak. "Your Grace, wait. At least take this. The roads to London are dangerous, especially for a woman traveling alone." "I'm not going to London," Eliza said, adjusting her seat. "Not yet. First I need answers." "Answers from whom?" "From the one person who might actually tell me the truth about what happened 5 years ago." Eliza urged the mare forward, leaving Mary staring after her in confusion. She rode hard toward the village, her mind racing faster than the horse's hooves. Someone had orchestrated yesterday's attack. Someone who knew exactly where Darian would be and when. Someone who'd planted Josephine in the tavern to draw him out. The question was who and why now? The answer, she suspected, lay with the one name that kept appearing in all the rumors, Catherine Ashford. If Catherine had truly been terrified of Darian, why? What had she seen or heard that made her flee? And why was her brother still so convinced of Darian's guilt? The Ashford estate was 10 miles north of Ravenscar, a journey that took Eliza through dense forests and along treacherous coastal roads. By the time she arrived, her hands were numb from gripping the reins, and her body ached from the punishing pace. The manor house was smaller than Ravenscar, but no less imposing, a Georgian structure surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens that looked incongruous against the wild landscape. A servant answered her knock, his eyes widening when she gave her name. "I need to speak with Lady Catherine," Eliza said. "It's urgent." "Lady Catherine doesn't receive visitors, Your Grace, especially not—" He caught himself. "Especially not wives of the Duke of Ravenscar," Eliza finished. "I understand, but please tell her I'm not here to defend my husband. I'm here because I need to know the truth, woman to woman." The servant looked uncertain, then nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared into the house, leaving Eliza standing in the entrance hall beneath portraits of stern-faced Ashfords. Minutes ticked by. Eliza was beginning to think she'd be turned away when a soft voice spoke from the stairway. "You're braver than I was." Eliza turned to see a woman descending the stairs, young, perhaps 23, with blonde hair and pale blue eyes that held a haunted quality. She moved carefully, as if afraid the world might shatter around her. "Lady Catherine?" "Just Catherine, please. I gave up the title when I gave up my future." She studied Eliza with something like pity. "You shouldn't have come here." "I had to. Your brother came to Ravenscar yesterday making terrible accusations. Someone shot at my husband in the village, and everywhere I turn your name appears like a ghost haunting us both." Catherine flinched. "I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to forget." "Forget what? What happened between you and Darian?" For a long moment, Catherine didn't speak. Then she gestured toward a sitting room. "Come. But I warn you, the truth is worse than the rumors." They sat in a sunlit room filled with delicate furniture and fresh flowers, everything designed to be as unlike Ravenscar's brooding darkness as possible. Catherine poured tea with shaking hands. "How much has he told you?" "That you were engaged, that you became frightened and left, that he called off the wedding to spare you." "He told you the truth then? How unusual for him." Catherine took a sip of tea, then set it down untouched. "I was 18 when we met. My father wanted the alliance. The Blackthorn title and wealth would secure our family's position. Darian was charming at first, attentive. He courted me properly, said all the right things. I thought I could make it work." "What changed?" "I went to Ravenscar Manor 3 months before the wedding, to meet his household, see where I'd be living. That's when I learned about his father." Eliza leaned forward. "What about him?" Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. "The late Duke was a monster, Eliza. A violent, cruel man who terrorized everyone in his household. The servants whispered about it, beatings, rages, women who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But no one dared speak openly because the Duke was powerful, and people who crossed him had a way of ending up ruined or dead." "Darian's father did those things?" "Yes. And when I asked Darian about it, he—" Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. "He confirmed everything. He told me his father had made his childhood a living nightmare, that he'd watched his mother suffer abuse for years and been powerless to stop it. And then he said something that terrified me." "What?" Catherine met Eliza's eyes. "He said, my father taught me exactly what kind of man I never want to become. But sometimes I look in the mirror and I see him staring back." Eliza's breath caught. "He was afraid he'd become like his father." "He was convinced of it. He told me the rage was always there, just beneath the surface, that he fought duels and ruined rivals because it was the only way to channel the violence he inherited. He said marrying him would be like marrying a loaded gun. You never knew when it might go off." "So you ran." "I panicked," Catherine admitted. "On our wedding day, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. What if he was right? What if the violence was hereditary? What if I ended up like his mother, trapped, broken, destroyed. I locked myself in my room and refused to come out. I threatened to harm myself if anyone forced me to go through with it. And Darian? He stood outside my door for hours, never raised his voice, never tried to break in. Finally, he said, "You're right to be afraid, Catherine. I'm not the man you deserve. I'm calling off the wedding. You're free to go." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "He let me go, Eliza. He could have forced the marriage. My father would have supported it. But he let me walk away." "Then why does your brother still blame him?" Catherine's expression darkened. "Because someone has been feeding him lies. Someone who wants Richard to believe Darian is dangerous. Someone who's been using me as a weapon against the Duke for 3 years." "Who?" Before Catherine could answer, the door burst open and Lord Ashford stormed in, his face purple with rage. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, pointing at Eliza. "Catherine, I told you never to speak of this." "Richard, she deserves to know." "Know what? That you were foolish enough to fall for Blackthorn's act? That he manipulated you into leaving so he could play the wounded party?" "That's not what happened," Catherine said, her voice strengthening. "You've twisted everything, Richard. You and—" "Enough!" Ashford grabbed Catherine's arm, making her wince. "Get out of my house, Your Grace, and stay away from my sister." Eliza stood, fury blazing in her chest. "Take your hands off her, now. This is my house. I'll do as I please. And she's a grown woman, not your property." Eliza moved closer, and something in her expression made Ashford release Catherine's arm. "You've been lying about my husband. You've been using your sister's pain to fuel a vendetta. Why? What did Darian ever do to you?" "He exists," Ashford spat. "He inherited everything that should have been mine. The title, the wealth, the power. His father promised my father that I would marry Catherine to a Blackthorn fortune. But when the old Duke died under suspicious circumstances, everything went to that bastard son instead." The pieces clicked into place in Eliza's mind. "You wanted Darian convicted of murder. If he'd been found guilty, the title and estates would have been forfeit to the crown, and you could have petitioned for them as Catherine's intended." "He killed his own father. Everyone knows it." "No," Catherine said quietly. "He didn't, Richard. I know you want to believe it, but it's not true." "You don't know anything. You weren't there." "Neither were you." The siblings stared at each other, years of resentment and pain crackling between them. Eliza backed toward the door. "I'm leaving. But know this, Lord Ashford. If you continue spreading lies about my husband, I will destroy you. I'll expose your scheme to steal the Blackthorn inheritance. I'll ruin your reputation the way you've tried to ruin his." "You're just a girl playing Duchess," Ashford sneered. "You have no power. I'm the Duchess of Ravenscar, and you'd be surprised what power that gives me." She left before he could respond, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and triumph. Outside, she found Catherine waiting by her horse. "Thank you," Catherine said softly, "for standing up to Richard. No one ever has before." "You should leave this house," Eliza told her. "Your brother is using you. You deserve better." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. You're stronger than you think, Catherine. You proved that by walking away from a marriage you didn't want. Now walk away from a brother who's poisoning your life." Catherine's eyes shimmered with tears. "Tell Darian. Tell him I'm sorry. For everything. Tell him yourself. When this is over." Eliza mounted her horse and rode away, her mind already racing ahead to her next move. She'd learned what she needed from Catherine. Lord Ashford had motive and opportunity to orchestrate the attacks on Darian, but he was just one man. Who else was involved? Who had the resources to hire Josephine, to arrange the shooting, to coordinate a campaign of destruction against the Duke of Ravenscar? The answer came to her as she rode through the forest, a name that had been lurking in the shadows of every conversation. Lady Cordelia, the woman in the crimson dress who'd approached their table at the wedding breakfast. The one who'd wielded Catherine's name like a weapon. The one who'd looked at Darian with something that went beyond disdain into pure hatred. Eliza changed direction, urging her exhausted horse toward the coast road that led to Lady Cordelia's estate. The sun was setting by the time she arrived at Thornfield House, a sprawling mansion that overlooked the sea. Unlike Ravenscar's Gothic severity or the Ashford estate's genteel elegance, Thornfield was ostentatious, all white columns and marble statues and manicured lawns. A servant tried to turn her away at the door, but Eliza pushed past him. "Tell Lady Cordelia the Duchess of Ravenscar is here. Now!" She was shown to a drawing room decorated in shades of scarlet and gold, every surface covered with expensive trinkets and artwork. Eliza stood by the window, watching the sun sink into the sea, and tried to calm her racing heart. "Well, well," Lady Cordelia's voice dripped with amusement. "The little Duchess has grown claws. How delightful." Eliza turned to find the older woman standing in the doorway, resplendent in a deep purple gown that matched her knowing smile. "You've been orchestrating all of this," Eliza said without preamble. "The rumors, the attacks, the lies about Darian, it's been you all along." "My dear child, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. You knew exactly how to hurt him. Catherine's name, his father's death, every weakness he has. You've been exploiting them systematically." Lady Cordelia moved to a sideboard and poured herself wine. "And if I have, what will you do about it? You're just a girl playing at being a duchess. Darian married you because you were convenient, not because he wanted you. Why do you hate him so much?" "Hate him?" Cordelia laughed. "I don't hate him, darling. I loved him, completely, desperately. For 5 years I was his mistress, his confidant, the woman who understood him when no one else could. And then one day he simply ended it, said it was over, gave me a fortune and sent me away like I was nothing. So this is revenge for a broken heart?" "This is justice," Cordelia hissed, her elegant facade cracking. "He used me, just like he used Catherine and every other woman foolish enough to care about him. He deserves to suffer. He deserves to lose everything, his reputation, his power, his precious duchess." "You hired Josephine. You convinced Lord Ashford to keep stirring up trouble. You arranged the shooting. Prove it." "I will. I'll find evidence, and when I do—" "There is no evidence, you silly girl. I'm far too clever for that. Everything that's happened to your husband has been perfectly orchestrated to look like the natural consequences of his own terrible reputation." Cordelia's smile was vicious. "And it's working. By now, London society is buzzing with fresh rumors. His enemies are circling. And when the final blow comes, and it will come, there will be nothing left of the great Duke of Ravenscar but ashes." "What final blow?" "You'll see soon enough. In fact," Cordelia checked a small clock on the mantel, "it should be happening right about now." Cold dread flooded Eliza's veins. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I simply made sure certain people knew where Darian would be tonight in London. People who have wanted him dead for a very long time." Eliza's hands went numb. "You set a trap." "I created an opportunity. What happens next is entirely up to fate, and to how many men want revenge on the Duke of Ravenscar." Eliza ran. She heard Cordelia's laughter following her as she raced to her horse, her mind screaming a single thought: "I have to reach him. I have to warn him." But London was hours away, and night was falling fast. She rode harder than she ever had in her life, pushing the exhausted mare beyond what was safe, beyond what was sane. The horse stumbled twice on the dark road, nearly throwing Eliza into the rocks below. But she held on, driven by a terror she'd never known. Darian was walking into an ambush, and she was too far away to stop it. The mare finally gave out 5 miles from London, collapsing with heaving breaths. Eliza dismounted and ran to the nearest coaching inn, where she threw money at a startled driver and demanded his fastest carriage. "Where to, Your Grace?" "The Blackthorn townhouse, and don't spare the horses." They careened through the dark streets of London, past gaslights and closed shops and late-night revelers. Eliza pressed her face to the window, willing the carriage to move faster. When they finally reached the Blackthorn townhouse in Mayfair, she saw the crowd immediately. People were gathered in the street, staring up at the building. Some were shouting, others looked frightened, and in the center of it all, Eliza saw fire. Flames licked from the upper windows of the townhouse, sending smoke billowing into the night sky. "No," Eliza whispered. "No, no, no." She threw open the carriage door before it fully stopped and ran toward the burning building. A constable grabbed her arm. "You can't go in there, miss. The whole place is going up." My husband is inside, the Duke of Ravenscar. There's no one inside, Your Grace. The Duke arrived about an hour ago, but when the fire started, A tremendous crash cut him off as part of the roof caved in, sending sparks shooting into the sky. Eliza's legs gave out. The constable caught her, but she barely felt it. Her entire world had narrowed to the burning building and the horrible certainty that Darian was inside. Your Grace, a familiar voice cut through her shock. She looked up to see Darian's valet, Harrison, running toward her, his face streaked with soot. Where is he? Eliza demanded, grabbing the man's coat. Where's Darian? He went back inside, Your Grace. He said there were documents in his study that couldn't be lost. Evidence of some kind. I tried to stop him, but he... Another explosion from inside the house cut him off. Eliza pulled free and ran toward the building. Your Grace, no! Harrison shouted, but she ignored him. She made it through the front door before the heat drove her back. The entrance hall was an inferno, flames consuming the elegant furnishings and ancient portraits. Smoke choked her lungs, making her eyes stream. Darian, she screamed. Darian, where are you? A beam crashed down 10 feet in front of her, showering her with embers. She stumbled backward, coughing, her dress starting to smoke from the heat. Through the flames, she saw movement, a figure emerging from the smoke. Darian staggered into view, his clothes scorched, his face blackened with soot, clutching a metal strongbox to his chest. When he saw her, his eyes went wide with horror. Eliza? What are you? Get out! The whole building is coming down! But before either of them could move, the staircase collapsed, sending a cascade of burning wood and plaster between them. They were separated by a wall of fire. Go! Darian shouted. Get out now! Not without you! Damn it, Eliza. For once in your life, do what I say. Another beam fell, this one narrowly missing Darian's head. He dove to the side and Eliza lost sight of him in the smoke. Terror gave her strength she didn't know she had. She grabbed a heavy rug from near the door and threw it over the burning debris, creating a temporary path. Then she ran across it, feeling the heat through her boots, her lungs screaming for air. She found Darian on the other side, pinned under a fallen beam. I can't move it, he gasped. My leg. Eliza grabbed the beam and pulled with everything she had. It didn't budge. Leave me, Darian said. Save yourself. Shut up and help me lift. Eliza, I didn't ride through hell to reach you just to watch you die. Now lift. Something in her voice got through to him. Together, they heaved the beam up just enough for Darian to drag himself free. His leg was bleeding, but he could stand. They stumbled toward the door, supporting each other, as the house collapsed around them. They burst out onto the street just as the entire second floor gave way. The force of the collapse threw them forward, and they landed hard on the cobblestones. For a moment, Eliza couldn't move. She lay there gasping for air, her body screaming in pain. Then Darian's arms were around her, pulling her close, and he was saying her name over and over like a prayer. You could have died, he said hoarsely. You absolute fool, you could have died. So could you, she shot back. He laughed, a broken, desperate sound, and kissed her. This time there was nothing controlled about it, nothing held back. It was the kiss of a man who'd just faced death and found something worth living for on the other side. When they finally broke apart, both covered in soot and ash, Eliza saw tears streaking down Darian's face. I have to tell you something, he said. Something I should have told you years ago. Something I've been too afraid to admit even to myself. The truth about your father, Eliza said. I know. Lord Ashford accused you of murder. Lady Cordelia is orchestrating everything, and this fire was meant to kill me and destroy the evidence I've been gathering. Darian held up the strongbox. But I have it. Proof of everything. The money Cordelia's been paying to my enemies, the letters she sent to Josephine, documents showing Lord Ashford's attempts to steal my inheritance. Then we can stop them. Maybe. But first, he took a shaky breath. You need to know the truth about the night my father died. The whole truth. Not the version I've been letting people believe. Eliza took his hand. Tell me. Around them, firefighters worked to contain the blaze. Onlookers whispered and stared. But in that moment, it was just the two of them, covered in ash and blood, finally ready to tear down the walls between them. My father was drunk, Darian began, his voice raw. He'd been drinking all day, working himself into a rage. My mother and I were in the library. She was reading to me. I was 17, but she still read to me sometimes because it was the only time we felt safe. His hands tightened on hers. He came in demanding money. She said no. For the first time in her life, she refused him. And he attacked her, right in front of me, started choking her. Eliza's breath caught. I tried to stop him. I grabbed his arms, pulled him off her, but he was strong, even drunk. He threw me across the room, hit my head on the fireplace. When I came to, they were fighting at the top of the stairs. Tears were flowing freely down his face now. I saw him raise his hand to strike her, saw her try to defend herself, and then his voice broke. She pushed him, not hard, just enough to make him stumble backward. But he was drunk and off balance. He fell. Down the stairs, Eliza whispered. 14 steps. I counted them as I ran down after him. By the time I reached the bottom, he was dead. Broken neck. And my mother was standing at the top of the stairs, staring at her hands like she couldn't believe what they'd done. Darian, she died 6 months later. They said it was pneumonia, but I knew better. The guilt destroyed her. She'd killed a man, even though that man was a monster who'd made our lives hell. She couldn't live with it. He met Eliza's eyes, and in his gaze she saw years of pain, guilt, and fear. So yes, my father died because of me. If I'd been stronger, faster, if I'd protected my mother better— Stop, Eliza said firmly. Your mother was defending herself and you. What happened was an accident born from years of abuse. You're not guilty, Darian. Neither was she. The world wouldn't see it that way. If the truth came out, my mother's memory would be destroyed. She'd be remembered as a murderess, not a victim. So I let people believe I did it. I built this reputation as a dangerous man, someone capable of killing his own father. It kept the questions away. It kept my mother's secret safe. And it destroyed your life, Eliza said. You've been punishing yourself for 5 years for something that wasn't your fault. I should have saved her. You did save her. For 17 years, you survived together. And when she finally fought back, it was because she knew you would be strong enough to carry on without her. Darian pulled Eliza close, burying his face in her hair. She felt his body shake with silent sobs, years of grief and guilt finally being released. They stayed like that while the fire raged behind them and London watched. Finally, Darian pulled back and wiped his eyes. There's something else. Something in the strong box. He opened it with shaking hands and pulled out a leather journal. My mother kept a diary, detailed accounts of everything my father did, the abuse, the cruelty, witnesses who saw it happen, and letters. Letters she wrote but never sent, describing the hell she lived in. Evidence, Eliza breathed. Evidence that what happened that night was self-defense. Evidence that my father was a monster who deserved what he got. Darian's jaw tightened. This is what Cordelia wanted destroyed. This is what would have burned if you hadn't— He couldn't finish. We have it now, Eliza said. We have the truth. And we're going to use it to end this, once and for all. Darian looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. You came for me, he said wonderingly. You rode through the night, walked into a burning building. You could have stayed safe at Ravenscar, but you came for me. Did you really think I wouldn't? I hoped you wouldn't. I prayed you'd be smart enough to save yourself. Then you don't know me very well yet, husband. Eliza smiled through her tears. I'm not the fragile girl everyone thinks I am, and I don't abandon the people I— She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Darian's eyes searched hers. The people you what? Eliza took a breath and said the words that would change everything. The people I love. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Darian kissed her again, and this time it tasted like hope and promises and a future they'd both stopped believing in. When they finally broke apart, Harrison was standing nearby with a carriage. Your Grace, we should leave. The constable is asking questions, and there's a crowd forming. It's not safe here. Darian nodded and stood, pulling Eliza up with him. His injured leg nearly gave out, but she steadied him. Where do we go? She asked. Ravenscar, Darian said firmly. We go home. We gather our evidence. And tomorrow, we end this war once and for all. They climbed into the carriage, the strong box safe between them, and headed into the night. But as London disappeared behind them, Eliza saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure standing in the shadows across the street from the burning townhouse. Even from a distance, she recognized the crimson cloak. Lady Cordelia. And she was smiling. Eliza tightened her grip on Darian's hand as the carriage rattled through the darkness, her eyes still locked on the receding figure in crimson. Lady Cordelia had orchestrated everything. The fire, the rumors, years of systematic destruction. And from the look of triumph on her face, she believed she'd already won. She was watching, Eliza said quietly. Making sure you died in that fire. Darian followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. She made one critical mistake. What's that? She underestimated you. He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her soot-stained knuckles. She thought you were just another fragile woman who'd crumble under pressure. She didn't count on you being extraordinary. The words warmed something deep in Eliza's chest, but she couldn't shake the image of Cordelia's smile. She's not finished. Whatever she planned, the fire was only part of it. I know. Darian opened the strongbox and pulled out his mother's journal, handling it with reverence. But now we have weapons she doesn't know about. My mother documented everything, dates, witnesses, injuries. If we make this public, we destroy your mother's memory, Eliza finished. Everyone will know she killed your father, even if it was self-defense. Is that what you want? Darian stared at the journal, conflict warring across his face. I want the truth to come out. I want people to know what kind of monster my father was. But I also want to protect her. She suffered enough while she was alive. Then we find another way. We use the evidence to force Cordelia and Ashford to back down without dragging your mother through the mud. Eliza leaned forward. What else is in that box? Darian sorted through the contents, letters, bank statements, witness testimonies. His expression grew darker with each document he examined. Cordelia's been planning this for years, he said. She paid Josephine £500 to spread rumors in the village. She's been sending Lord Ashford money monthly, probably funding his legal attempts to contest my inheritance. And there are letters here to other people. Former servants, business rivals, even members of parliament. She built an entire network to destroy you. She was thorough. I'll give her that. Darian pulled out one final document and went still. What is it? A contract dated 5 years ago. His voice had gone dangerously quiet. Between Lady Cordelia Sterling and the late Duke of Ravenscar, my father. Eliza took the yellowed paper and read it by the carriage's dim lantern light. The words made her stomach turn. It was an agreement, the late Duke promising to arrange a marriage between his son and Cordelia's daughter from a previous marriage in exchange for Cordelia's company and a substantial fee. He sold you, Eliza whispered. Your own father tried to arrange your marriage as part of a business transaction with his mistress. That's why she's so angry. Darian's laugh was bitter. When my father died, the contract became void. She expected to secure her daughter's future through marriage to a duke. Instead, she got nothing. So she decided if she couldn't have you, she'd destroy you. Hell hath no fury, Darian murmured. He met Eliza's eyes. Do you understand now? This is the world I come from. Transactions and betrayals. People who see other people as commodities to be bought and sold. This is why I never believed in love, why I never let anyone close. And yet here we are, Eliza said softly, close enough to nearly die together in a fire. Despite everything, he smiled. Here we are? The carriage hit a rut in the road, jostling them together. Darian winced as his injured leg knocked against the seat. Let me see that, Eliza said, kneeling on the carriage floor. It's fine. It's bleeding through your trousers. Don't be stubborn. She pulled up his pant leg carefully, revealing a nasty gash along his shin. The beam had caught him hard enough to split the skin, though thankfully it didn't look deep enough to have hit bone. I need to bind this, she said. Do we have anything? She stopped, then reached down and began tearing strips from her petticoat. Eliza, you don't have to. Hush. I've patched up my sister's scrapes often enough. This is just larger. She worked quickly, wrapping the makeshift bandages around his leg with practiced efficiency. There. It'll hold until we reach Ravenscar and get a proper doctor. Darian watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're remarkable. You know that? You've mentioned it once or twice. She climbed back onto the seat, suddenly aware of how close they were in the small space. Darian, what happens when we get home? We prepare for war. His voice hardened. Cordelia thinks she's won, but she's wrong. Tomorrow, we take these documents and we go on the offensive. No more hiding, no more letting the rumors spread unchecked. We expose her for what she is. She has powerful friends. This won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. He cupped her face gently. But I'm not alone anymore. That makes all the difference. They arrived at Ravenscar Manor near dawn, the ancient fortress silhouetted against a lightening sky. The entire household was awake, servants rushing out to meet them with worried faces. Thank heavens you're safe, Mrs. Graves exclaimed, her usual severity cracking. We heard about the fire. The messenger said the whole townhouse burned to the ground. Not quite, Darian said as Harrison helped him down from the carriage. But close enough? We'll need a doctor for my leg, and rooms prepared for an extended stay. We won't be returning to London for some time. Of course, Your Grace. And Your Grace, she turned to Eliza, taking in her ruined dress and soot-stained face. You look like you've been through hell itself. Just London, Eliza said, accepting Mary's supporting arm, though I'm not sure there's much difference. Inside, the household sprang into action. A doctor was summoned from the village. Hot baths were drawn. Clean clothes were laid out. Eliza insisted on staying with Darian while the doctor examined his leg, despite Mary's protest that it wasn't proper. I'm his wife, Eliza said firmly. There's nothing improper about it. The doctor, an elderly man named Fletcher, who'd been serving the Ravenscar estate for 40 years, cleaned and stitched the wound with practiced hands. You're lucky, Your Grace, he told Darian. Another inch to the left, and it would have shattered your knee. As it is, you'll have a scar, but full use of the leg. How long before I can ride? Darian asked. Ride? You should be resting for at least a week. How long, Fletcher? The doctor sighed. You Blackthorns are all the same, stubborn as rocks. 3 days, minimum, and that's only if you keep it clean and don't do anything foolish. Define foolish. Anything involving swords, horses, or high society gatherings where you might be expected to dance or duel. Despite the pain and exhaustion, Darian laughed. I'll try to restrain myself. After the doctor left, Eliza helped Darian into bed and sat beside him, both of them too wired to sleep despite their exhaustion. Tell me about your mother, she said quietly. Not how she died, but who she was before, when she was happy. Darian was silent for a long moment, and Eliza thought he might refuse. Then he began to speak, his voice soft with memory. She loved music. She'd play the piano for hours when my father wasn't home. Beautiful, complicated pieces that seemed to fill the whole house with light. And she had this laugh, rare but genuine, that sounded like wind chimes. She taught me to read when I was 4, started me on philosophy when I was 7. She believed in education as freedom, said knowledge was the one thing no one could take from you. She sounds wonderful. She was brilliant and kind and completely wasted on my father. His hand found Eliza's. She would have liked you. You remind me of her, actually. That same core of steel beneath the softness. I'm not soft, Eliza protested. You are. And that's not a weakness. It's what makes you strong. You care deeply, fight fiercely for the people you love. That takes more courage than any amount of coldness. Before Eliza could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Your Grace, Mrs. Graves called. I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Who? Darian called back. The door opened and Catherine Ashford stepped inside, pale but determined. Eliza shot to her feet. Catherine, how did you... I left, Catherine said simply. After you visited, I packed a bag and walked out. Richard tried to stop me, but I just kept walking. I ended up at the inn in Ravenscar village, and when I heard about the fire, I knew I had to come. Why? Darian asked, his voice carefully neutral. Catherine moved closer, her hands twisted together nervously. Because Eliza was right. I've been letting Richard use my fear as a weapon against you for 3 years. I've been hiding from the truth because it was easier than facing it. What truth? Eliza asked gently. That you never hurt me, Darian. That I hurt myself with my own paranoia and fear. And that by running away and letting people believe the worst, I became part of the problem. Tears streamed down Catherine's face. I'm so sorry for everything. Darian sat up slowly, wincing as his leg protested. You have nothing to apologize for, Catherine. You were 18 and frightened. I don't blame you for that. But I blamed you. I let everyone blame you. And now... She pulled a folded letter from her pocket. I found this in Richard's study before I left. I thought you should see it. Eliza took the letter and read it aloud. It was from Lady Cordelia to Lord Ashford, dated just 3 days earlier. The pieces are falling into place. The fire will eliminate both the Duke and the evidence he's been gathering. Once he's dead, we move forward with the inheritance challenge. With the Blackthorn line ended, the Crown will be forced to review the succession. Your claim through Catherine's engagement, combined with the murder accusations, should be sufficient to secure at least a portion of the estate. Don't lose your nerve now, Richard. We're so close. Silence filled the room. She planned to kill you, Catherine whispered. Not just ruin you, kill you. And Richard knew. He was part of it. Your brother is in deep, Darian said grimly. If he backed out now, Cordelia would destroy him too. She probably has evidence of his involvement in everything, the rumors, the attacks. He's trapped. Then we use that, Eliza said, her mind racing. We offer him a way out, testify against Cordelia, reveal her whole operation, and we won't press charges. He gets to keep his freedom and what's left of his reputation. He won't take it, Catherine said. Richard's too proud. He'd rather go down fighting than admit he was wrong. Then we don't give him a choice. Eliza stood, pacing. We present him with evidence of his crimes, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, attempted theft of the Blackthorn inheritance. We show him exactly how much prison time he's facing, and then we offer mercy in exchange for cooperation. Darian was staring at her with something like awe. You've thought this through. I've had time to think, and I'm tired of playing defense. She turned to Catherine. Can you get a message to your brother? Arrange a meeting? Yes, probably. But he'll be furious that I came here. He might not listen. He'll listen, Eliza said with certainty, because we'll make him an offer he can't refuse. His freedom for the truth. Catherine nodded slowly. I'll try. But Eliza, he's dangerous when cornered. You need to be careful. So am I, Eliza said quietly. He's about to find that out. Over the next 2 days, while Darian healed and Catherine worked on contacting her brother, Eliza transformed Ravenscar Manor into a command center for their counterattack. She had Mary go through all the documents in the strongbox, creating a detailed timeline of Cordelia's campaign. She sent trusted servants to London to gather gossip and track Cordelia's movements. She even convinced old Dr. Fletcher to write a medical report detailing the injuries Darian had sustained in the fire, evidence of the attempted murder. You're building a case, Darian observed, watching her work from his bed where the doctor had confined him, like a lawyer preparing for trial. I'm building an arsenal, Eliza corrected. Every piece of evidence is a weapon we can use. By the time we're done, Cordelia won't know what hit her. You're enjoying this. She looked up from the documents she was organizing. Is that so wrong? Not at all. It's just unexpected. The shy girl who married me 3 weeks ago wouldn't have known how to do any of this. That girl still exists, but she learned something important. Eliza set down her papers and crossed to sit beside him. She learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back. That being kind doesn't mean being weak, and that she married a man worth fighting for. Darian pulled her close, mindful of his healing leg. I don't deserve you. We've established that. But you're stuck with me anyway. She kissed him softly. How are you feeling, honestly? Like I was hit by a burning building, but alive. Thanks to you. His expression grew serious. Eliza, when this is over, when we've dealt with Cordelia and Ashford and cleared my name, I want things to change between us. What do you mean? I want a real marriage, not a business arrangement, not separate rooms and polite distance. I want you as my wife in every sense. I want to build something with you. He cupped her face. I know I said I wasn't capable of love, but you've proven me wrong about so many things. Maybe I was wrong about that too." Before Eliza could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Your Grace," Mrs. Graves called, "Lord Ashford is here, and he's not alone." Eliza and Darian exchanged glances. "Who's with him?" Darian called. "He brought 20 men, Your Grace, armed. They're demanding to speak with you and Lady Catherine. They're saying—" Mrs. Graves's voice dropped. "They're saying they've come to arrest you for murder." The moment Eliza had been preparing for had arrived. She helped Darian stand, supporting him as he pulled on his coat and straightened his shoulders despite the pain. Together, they descended the grand staircase to face Lord Ashford and his armed mob. The entrance hall of Ravenscar Manor had become a battlefield. Lord Ashford stood at the center of his men, looking less like a nobleman and more like a general preparing for war. His face was flushed with anger and something else, desperation. "Darian Blackthorne," he announced loudly, "I'm here with witnesses and evidence that you murdered your father 5 years ago. These men represent the Crown's interest in this matter. You will surrender yourself for questioning, or we will take you by force." "On whose authority?" Darian asked calmly, though Eliza felt tension radiating from him. "On the authority of justice," Ashford spat. "I have sworn statements from servants who heard you threatening your father. I have medical evidence that his death was not accidental, and I have testimony from Lady Cordelia Sterling that you confessed the crime to her." "All lies," Eliza said, stepping forward. "Manufactured evidence from a woman scorned and a man desperate to steal an inheritance that was never his." Ashford's eyes narrowed. "Stay out of this, Your Grace. This doesn't concern you." "Everything about my husband concerns me." She descended the last few steps, placing herself between Darian and the armed men. "And I have evidence of my own. Evidence that you and Lady Cordelia conspired to murder my husband. Evidence of fraud, extortion, and attempted theft. So before you throw around accusations, Lord Ashford, perhaps you should worry about your own crimes." She nodded to Mary, who appeared carrying the strongbox. "This contains bank records showing payments from Lady Cordelia to you," Eliza continued. "Letters detailing your conspiracy. Testimony from Josephine, who's been more than willing to talk now that she realizes she was being used. And documentation of the contract your co-conspirator had with the late Duke, a contract that became void upon his death, leaving her with nothing." Color drained from Ashford's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Eliza pulled out the damning letter Catherine had found. "This is in your handwriting, Richard, discussing the fire that nearly killed my husband, discussing how to profit from his death. That's conspiracy to commit murder. That's a hanging offense." The men around Ashford began to shift nervously, exchanging glances. "She's lying," Ashford insisted, but his voice had lost its certainty. "All of it is fabricated." "Then let's take it to the courts," Darian said quietly. "Let's lay all the evidence out, yours and mine, and see which story holds up. But I should warn you, Richard, I've spent 5 years building walls around the truth. You think you know what happened the night my father died, but you have no idea." "Then tell us," one of Ashford's men called out. "Tell us the truth, Your Grace. Let us hear it from you." Darian looked at Eliza. She gave him the smallest nod. He took a breath and spoke, his voice carrying through the hall. "My father was a violent, abusive man who terrorized everyone in his household. He beat servants, destroyed lives, and made my mother's existence a living hell. On the night he died, he attacked her. I tried to stop him. In the struggle, she pushed him in self-defense. He fell down the stairs and broke his neck." Gasps echoed through the assembled crowd. "My mother lived with guilt over that accident for 6 months before it killed her. I let people believe I was the one who pushed him because I would rather the world think me a murderer than have them remember my mother that way." Darian's voice cracked. "I've spent 5 years protecting her memory. I've endured the accusations, the rumors, the hatred, all to keep her name clean, and I'd do it again." Silence fell, broken only by the sound of the wind outside. Then Catherine stepped forward from where she'd been hiding in the shadows. "It's true," she said softly. "All of it. I found my brother's letters. I saw Lady Cordelia's plans. And I've seen the late Duke's contract with my own eyes. My brother and Lady Cordelia have been using me, using my fear and trauma to wage war against an innocent man." "Catherine, Ashford reached for her, but she stepped back. No, Richard, this ends now. I'm not going to be your weapon anymore. I'm not going to let you destroy another life just because you're too proud to admit you were wrong. Ashford's face twisted with rage, and something else. Fear. You have no idea what you've done. Cordelia will... Will what? A new voice cut through the hall. Everyone turned to see Lady Cordelia sweeping through the open doors, resplendent in black velvet, looking like a queen entering her throne room. Will destroy all of you? She finished, her smile razor sharp. Yes, I will. Because you're all fools if you think this little performance changes anything. She strode to the center of the hall, her eyes sweeping over the assembled crowd with contempt. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I paid Josephine to spread rumors. Yes, I encouraged Richard to pursue his inheritance claim. Yes, I orchestrated the fire. And do you know why? Her gaze locked on Darian. Because you deserved it. You used me for 5 years. My body, my connections, my intelligence. You treated me like a convenient mistress to be discarded when you grew bored. You destroyed my daughter's future. So yes, I decided to destroy you in return. I gave you a fortune when we parted, Darian said. I wrote recommendations that secured your daughter an excellent marriage. I treated you with respect and generosity. You treated me like a transaction. Cordelia's composure cracked. Everything with you is cold calculation. No emotion, no real connection. You're just like your father, a heartless bastard who sees people as tools. No, Eliza said firmly. He's nothing like his father. His father was a monster who hurt people for pleasure. Darian pushes people away because he's spent his whole life watching what happens when you let someone too close. But he's learning, he's changing, and the fact that you can't see that says more about you than it does about him. Cordelia's laugh was bitter. How touching. The naive little duchess defending her damaged duke. Tell me, dear, has he told you he loves you yet? Or is he still pretending he's incapable of the emotion? What I feel for my wife is none of your concern, Darian said coldly. Of course it isn't. Because you don't feel anything, do you? You're empty inside. A beautiful shell with nothing but ice at the core. That's where you're wrong, Eliza said. And that's why you lost. She turned to Ashford's men. You came here to arrest a murderer. Well, there's one standing right in front of you. Lady Cordelia Sterling conspired to commit murder, attempted to destroy evidence, and orchestrated a campaign of terror spanning years. We have documented proof of all of it. You have nothing that would hold up in court, Cordelia snapped. Actually, we do, a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Josephine stepping into the hall, flanked by 2 constables. I'm prepared to testify, Josephine said, not meeting Cordelia's eyes. About everything. The money you paid me, the lies you told me to spread, the promises you made, all of it. Cordelia's face went white. You wouldn't dare. I would. Because the Duke's right. I was being used. And I'm tired of being someone's pawn. Josephine looked at Darian. I'm sorry, Your Grace. For all of it. One of the constables stepped forward. Lady Cordelia Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and attempted arson. You'll need to come with us. For a moment, Cordelia stood frozen, her perfect composure finally shattering. Then she lunged for Darian, her hands reaching for him like claws. If I can't have you, no one will. She never reached him. Eliza stepped between them and, without thinking, threw a punch that connected squarely with Cordelia's jaw. The older woman went down hard, sprawling on the marble floor. The entire hall erupted in chaos, men shouting, constables rushing forward, Ashford trying to slip toward the door. Stop him, Eliza called, and 2 of Ashford's own men grabbed him, their loyalty clearly shaken by the revelations. As the constables hauled Cordelia to her feet and clapped her in irons, she looked at Darian one last time. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, Darian said quietly. It is. They took her away, along with Lord Ashford, leaving behind a stunned crowd. Eliza turned to find Darian staring at her with an expression of amazement. Did you just punch a countess? He asked. Yes? Her hand was throbbing. Is that going to be a problem? He started to laugh, real, genuine laughter that echoed through the hall and transformed his entire face. A problem? Eliza, that was the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, ignoring his injured leg, and kissed her in front of everyone, the servants, the constables, Ashford's men, Catherine. A declaration that this woman was his and he was hers, and the world could think what it wanted. When they finally broke apart, the crowd was staring at them with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. The Duke of Ravenscar, the cold, heartless monster of legend, was smiling, and his Duchess had just punched out the woman who tried to destroy them both. One of Ashford's men, a grizzled veteran named Thomas, who'd watched the whole scene, finally spoke. "Your Grace," he said to Darian, "I think I speak for all of us when I say, we may have misjudged you." Darian inclined his head. "That's all I ask. A chance to be seen for who I really am, not the legend that was built around me." "And who are you really?" Thomas asked. Darian looked at Eliza, and the softness in his expression was answer enough. "I'm a man who's learning that the past doesn't have to define the future, that walls built to keep people out can also trap you inside, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone in." He raised Eliza's hand to his lips. "I'm a man in love with his extraordinary wife." Eliza's breath caught. It was the first time he'd said the words aloud, in front of witnesses, without hesitation or fear. "I love you too," she whispered, "even when you're insufferably stubborn and try to protect me by running into burning buildings. I'll try to keep the burning buildings to a minimum in the future." "See that you do." As the crowd dispersed and the household began to settle back into normalcy, Catherine approached them quietly. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For giving me the courage to stand up to Richard. For showing me what real strength looks like." "What will you do now?" Eliza asked. "I don't know. I have some money of my own, enough to live independently for a while. Maybe I'll travel, see parts of the world I've only read about." She managed a small smile. "Maybe I'll find out who Catherine Ashford really is, without the fear and trauma defining her." "You're welcome at Ravenscar any time," Darian said. "Consider us friends." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought I'd hear you say that." "Neither did I. But apparently I'm full of surprises these days." After Catherine left to pack her things, Darian and Eliza finally found themselves alone in his study, the door closed against the world. "Your leg must be killing you," Eliza said, noticing how carefully he was moving. "Worth it." He lowered himself into a chair with a wince. "Eliza, about what I said out there, did you mean it?" "Every word. I love you. I think I started falling for you the day you stood up to me in the library, refusing to be intimidated, but I was too much of a coward to admit it, even to myself." "You're many things, Darian Blackthorne, but you're not a coward." She knelt beside his chair. "You spent 5 years taking the blame for something you didn't do to protect your mother's memory. You've endured hatred and isolation rather than expose her secrets. That's not cowardice. That's love. It's also stubbornness and pride. I should have fought back years ago. Should have exposed Cordelia the moment she started her campaign. You were protecting the person you loved. There's no shame in that." Eliza took his hands. "But that chapter is over now. The truth is out. Cordelia and Ashford are facing justice, and we can finally start fresh." "A new beginning," Darian murmured. "I like the sound of that." "Good. Because I have plans for us." "Oh?" "We're going to restore this house's reputation. We're going to rebuild your standing in society. We're going to show the world that the Duke and Duchess of Ravenscar are a force to be reckoned with." She grinned. "And we're going to do it together." Darian pulled her into his lap, careful of his injured leg. "Together. I like the sound of that even more." He kissed her. And this time there was no desperation, no fear, just the promise of a future they'd fought for and won. Outside, the sun was setting over Ravenscar Manor, painting the ancient stones in shades of gold. The fortress that had seemed so forbidding 3 weeks ago now felt like home. The war wasn't completely over. There would be trials, testimony, society's judgment to face. But the tide had turned. The monster of Ravenscar had become a man. The fragile Duchess had become a warrior, and together they'd proven that truth was stronger than lies, and love was stronger than fear. The worst was behind them. Or so they thought. The sound of shattering glass woke them both. Eliza bolted upright in the darkness, her heart hammering. Beside her, Darian was already moving, ignoring the pain in his healing leg as he crossed to the window. "Stay here," he commanded. "Not a chance." They'd fallen asleep in his study after their kiss, exhausted from the day's events. Now, in the dead hours before dawn, someone was attacking Ravenscar Manor. Another crash echoed from below, followed by shouting. Darian grabbed a poker from the fireplace, the closest thing to a weapon, and limped toward the door. Eliza snatched up a heavy candlestick and followed. The entrance hall was chaos. 3 men in dark clothes were smashing windows and overturning furniture while Mrs. Graves and the other servants cowered against the walls. One of the intruders had a torch, clearly planning to set the manor ablaze. "Enough!" Darian's voice cut through the mayhem like a whip. The men froze, turning to face him. In the flickering torchlight, Eliza recognized one of them. He'd been part of Ashford's mob earlier. "You were supposed to be arrested," Darian said coldly. "Cordelia's lapdog, weren't you?" The man spat. "Lady Cordelia paid us to finish the job. Said if we couldn't kill you in London, we'd do it here. Said to make it look like an accident, servants rising up against a cruel master." "Original," Darian said dryly. "But you've made one critical error." "What's that?" "You assume my household actually hates me." As if on cue, the servants moved. Harrison appeared from the shadows with a rifle. The stable master blocked the front door with 2 other men. Even Mrs. Graves picked up a heavy vase, her expression fierce. "We protect our own, Your Grace," she said firmly. "Always have." The intruders realized too late that they were surrounded. They tried to fight their way out, but they were outmatched and outnumbered. Within minutes, all 3 were subdued and tied up, waiting for the constables to collect them. Eliza helped Mrs. Graves check the servants for injuries while Darian questioned the captured men. None were seriously hurt, though the entrance hall looked like a battlefield. "This was Cordelia's last move," one of the intruders finally admitted under Darian's cold interrogation. "She sent word from her cell. Said if she was going down, she'd take you with her. Said she'd hired men to burn Ravenscar to the ground with you inside." "How many men?" Darian demanded. 6 of us. The other 3 should be—" An explosion rocked the manor's west wing. Fire bloomed in the darkness, and Eliza's blood turned to ice. The servants' quarters were in the west wing. Mary, Anne, all the people who'd shown her kindness. "Get everyone out!" Darian shouted. "Now!" Chaos erupted as servants fled the burning wing. Darian hobbled toward the flames, but Eliza grabbed his arm. "Your leg. You can't—" "Mary's room is on the 3rd floor. She won't be able to get down the main stairs." He pulled free. "I'm not losing anyone else to fire." He disappeared into the smoke before she could stop him. Eliza stood frozen for 1 heartbeat, 2. Then she turned to Harrison. "Get buckets. Form a line to the well. We fight this fire together." The household sprang into action with practiced efficiency. Buckets passed hand to hand, water splashing onto flames, servants working in desperate synchronization to save their home. Eliza threw herself into the effort, her fine duchess's gown forgotten as she hauled water and beat back flames. Her hands blistered. Her lungs burned from smoke. But she didn't stop. Minutes felt like hours. Then Darian emerged from the burning wing carrying Mary over his shoulder, his face black with soot, coughing violently. "She was trapped," he gasped. "Window wouldn't open." Eliza ran to them as he set Mary down gently. The girl was unconscious but breathing, her face pale against the scorched grass. "Is anyone else inside?" Eliza demanded. "Everyone's out," Harrison confirmed, doing a quick head count. "We're all here, Your Grace." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by determination. She turned to face the assembled household, servants, stable hands, kitchen staff, all looking to her and Darian for guidance. "This ends tonight," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Cordelia thought she could destroy us by destroying our home. She thought we'd crumble, turn on each other, fall apart. She was wrong." She moved to stand beside Darian, taking his hand. "We are Ravenscar," she continued, "stone and will and the determination to survive anything thrown at us. So we fight. We save what we can. We rebuild what we can't. And tomorrow, we make sure Cordelia Sterling never threatens anyone again." A cheer rose from the servants, and they returned to fighting the fire with renewed vigor. By the time dawn broke, they'd saved most of the manor. The west wing was heavily damaged, but the structure was sound. The entrance hall could be repaired. Ravenscar would stand. Eliza collapsed on the front steps as the last embers were extinguished, exhausted beyond measure. Darian lowered himself beside her, his injured legs stretched out, both of them covered in soot and ash. "We look like we've been through a war," he observed. "We have been." She leaned against his shoulder. "But we won." "Did we?" "Look at the damage. The cost to repair this will be—" "We're alive," Eliza interrupted. "Our people are alive. Everything else can be fixed." He wrapped an arm around her, and they sat in silence as the sun rose over the sea, painting the wounded manor in shades of gold. Mrs. Graves approached with tea. Somehow, impossibly, she'd managed to brew tea in the midst of chaos. "Your Graces," she said, offering them cups. "The constables just arrived. They've taken the last of Cordelia's men into custody. And there's a messenger from London. He says the trials are being expedited. Both Lady Cordelia and Lord Ashford will face the courts within the week." "That fast?" Eliza asked. "Apparently attempted murder of a duke gets priority treatment," Mrs. Graves said dryly. "Also, the evidence you provided was so comprehensive that the Crown wants this resolved quickly. They don't like scandals involving the nobility dragging on." Darian stood slowly. "Then we go to London. We see this through to the end." "Your leg," Eliza began. "Will heal, but this won't be finished until we face them in court and make sure they can never hurt anyone again." 3 days later, Eliza stood in the court of the King's Bench in London, dressed in her finest gown, watching as Lady Cordelia Stirling and Lord Richard Ashford were brought before the judges. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the scandalous case, attempted murder, conspiracy, a 5-year campaign of destruction against a duke. Everyone wanted to witness the spectacle. Cordelia looked diminished in her prisoner's gray dress, her beauty faded without the armor of expensive clothes and cosmetics. But her eyes still held defiance as she glared at Darian across the courtroom. Ashford looked worse, haggard, broken, clearly realizing the magnitude of what he'd lost. Catherine sat in the gallery, her presence a silent testimony against her brother. The chief prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. Bank records showing payments to conspirators, letters detailing the plot. Testimony from Josephine, who described in painful detail how she'd been manipulated into spreading lies. The contract between Cordelia and the late Duke, revealing her true motive. Darian was called to testify. He walked to the stand with only the slightest limp, his bearing every inch the Duke. "Your Grace," the prosecutor began, "tell the court about the night your father died." A hush fell over the courtroom. Darian took a breath and spoke the truth he'd hidden for 5 years. "My father was a violent man who abused everyone in his household. On the night in question, he attacked my mother. I attempted to intervene. In the struggle, my mother pushed him in self-defense. He fell down the stairs. His death was ruled accidental because that's what it was. A tragic accident born from years of abuse." "And you allowed rumors of murder to circulate rather than reveal this?" "I did. To protect my mother's memory. She lived with guilt over the accident for 6 months before it killed her. I wasn't going to let the world remember her as anything but the brilliant, kind woman she was." "Even at the cost of your own reputation?" "Even so." The prosecutor nodded and presented the medical examiner's original report from 5 years ago. It confirmed the death was consistent with a fall. There was no evidence of foul play beyond the speculation Cordelia and others had manufactured. When it was the defense's turn, Cordelia's lawyer tried to paint her as a woman scorned, driven to extremes by heartbreak. Lady Cordelia's only crime, the lawyer argued, was loving the Duke too much and being devastated when that love was not returned. Eliza rose from her seat. "May I address the court?" she asked. The judges conferred briefly, then nodded. Eliza walked to the center of the courtroom, aware of every eye upon her. "Love doesn't hire assassins," she said clearly. "Love doesn't orchestrate fires meant to kill. Love doesn't wage a 5-year campaign to destroy someone's life and reputation. What Lady Cordelia felt wasn't love, it was obsession and entitlement. She believed she owned my husband, and when he dared to choose his own path, she decided to destroy him." She turned to face Cordelia directly. "You had a choice. When your relationship ended, you could have moved forward with dignity. You had wealth, status, a daughter who needed you. Instead, you chose revenge. You chose to become the monster you accused my husband of being, and now you'll face the consequences." Cordelia's composure finally shattered. "You know nothing," she shrieked. "You're just a child playing at being a duchess. You have no idea what it's like to be used and discarded, to watch everything you planned fall apart." "You're right," Eliza said quietly. "I don't know what that's like. Because my husband has never used me. He's never discarded me. He treats me as an equal, a partner, someone whose thoughts and feelings matter. That's what real love looks like, Lady Cordelia. And you never had it because you never wanted a partner. You wanted a possession." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judges called for order. After 3 hours of deliberation, the verdict came down. Lady Cordelia Sterling was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted arson, fraud, and a litany of other charges, sentenced to 20 years in prison. Lord Richard Ashford, who'd cooperated in exchange for a lighter sentence, received 10 years. As the guards led Cordelia away, she looked at Darian one final time. "You'll regret this," she said. "Both of you. You think you've won, but we have won," Darian interrupted. "And the only regret I have is that I didn't fight back sooner. But I was too busy protecting the dead to fight for the living. That changes now." Cordelia was taken away, still spitting curses. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. News of the verdict had spread quickly. As Darian and Eliza emerged, a hush fell. Then, slowly, someone began to applaud. Others joined in. The applause grew until it echoed off the buildings, a sound Eliza had never expected to hear directed at the Duke of Ravenscar. An elderly man stepped forward, one of the villagers from Ravenscar. "Your Grace," he said, doffing his cap, "we owe you an apology. We believed the lies. We thought the worst. We should have known better." "You believed what you were told," Darian said. "I don't fault you for that. I only ask that going forward we build something better, a community based on truth, not rumor." "Aye, Your Grace. That we can do." Others came forward, people who'd spread rumors, who'd feared him, who'd believed the legend instead of looking for the man beneath. One by one, they apologized, asked for forgiveness, extended hands in friendship. Darian accepted each apology with grace, and Eliza watched her husband transform before her eyes. The walls he'd built were finally coming down. They returned to Ravenscar Manor to find the household in full repair mode. In the week they'd been gone, the servants had worked tirelessly to restore their home. The entrance hall gleamed. The west wing was being rebuilt. Fresh flowers filled every room. "Welcome home, Your Graces," Mrs. Graves said with the closest thing to a smile Eliza had ever seen on the stern housekeeper's face. That night, Darian and Eliza stood together in the newly repaired library, looking out at the sea. "It's really over," Eliza said softly. "The trials, the attacks, all of it." "One chapter is over," Darian corrected, "but we're just beginning the next one." He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "Eliza Blackthorne, Duchess of Ravenscar, would you do me the honor of marrying me again? Properly this time. Not an arrangement, not a business transaction, but a real wedding between two people who choose each other." Eliza's breath caught. "We're already married." "Legally, yes, but I want to stand before everyone we know and declare my love for you. I want to make vows I actually mean. I want to choose you, publicly and without reservation, the way I should have from the beginning." Tears streamed down Eliza's face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The second wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Ravenscar took place 1 month later in the gardens of Ravenscar Manor, with the sea as their witness. Unlike their first wedding, cold, formal, full of whispers and dread, this ceremony was a celebration. Eliza's family came from Hartwell Manor, her sisters serving as attendants. Catherine Ashford returned from her travels to stand as witness. The entire village attended, along with servants who'd become friends. Darian stood at the makeshift altar in simple formal wear, no longer hiding behind intimidating clothes and cold expressions. When Eliza walked toward him, he smiled, open, genuine, unguarded. They wrote their own vows. "I promise to always see you," Eliza said, her voice strong and clear. "Not the legend, not the reputation, but the man beneath. I promise to stand beside you in the storms and fight alongside you when enemies come. I promise to love you even when you're being insufferably stubborn, and to call you out when you're wrong." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "And I promise to build a life with you, not just endure it, but truly live it together." Darian's turn came, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I promise to let you in, to tear down the walls I built and trust you with all the parts of myself I've hidden. I promise to choose courage over fear, truth over convenient lies, and love over the safety of isolation." He took her hands. "You saved my life in more ways than one. You saw worth in me when I'd given up on myself. You fought for me when I'd stopped fighting for anything. And I promise to spend the rest of my life being the man you deserve, a man defined not by his past, but by the future we'll build together." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in cheers. Darian kissed Eliza as if it were the first time and the last time all at once, pouring everything he felt into that single moment. The celebration lasted long into the night. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and new memories made. Eliza danced with her father, who whispered that he was proud of her. She danced with her sisters, who looked at her with awe. She danced with Harrison and Thomas, and even Dr. Fletcher, who complained about his old bones but smiled the whole time. But her favorite dance was with Darian, swaying together under the stars as the party continued around them. "Happy?" he asked. "Deliriously." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Though I think Mrs. Graves might actually be enjoying herself. I saw her smile twice." "Mark it down as a miracle." He pulled her closer. "I have something for you." He led her away from the party, back into the manor and up to a room she'd never entered before, a tower study at the very top of the house. "This was my mother's sanctuary," Darian said, lighting candles. "The one place my father never came. After she died, I locked it up. I couldn't bear to come in here." The room was beautiful, circular, lined with bookshelves, with windows looking out over the sea. A piano sat in the corner, covered with a cloth. "I want you to have it," Darian continued. "Make it your own. Fill it with whatever makes you happy. But I thought, maybe you'd want to know her better. There are journals, letters, music she composed, all the parts of her I've been protecting." Eliza touched the covered piano reverently. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. She would have loved you, Eliza, and I think it's time I stopped hoarding her memory and started celebrating it." He pulled the cloth off the piano, revealing polished wood that still gleamed despite years of neglect. "Will you play something?" Eliza asked. "I don't know how. She tried to teach me, but I was too impatient." He smiled sadly. "That's one of my few regrets." "Then we'll learn together." Eliza sat on the bench and patted the space beside her. "Start with middle C." They stayed in the tower until dawn, Darian teaching Eliza what little he remembered while they laughed over wrong notes and shared stories about his mother. It felt like healing, like finally letting go of the grief he'd carried for so long. 1 year later, on a winter morning when frost painted the windows in delicate patterns, Eliza stood in that same tower room holding her infant son. Thomas Ashford Blackthorne had arrived 3 weeks early, squalling his outrage at the cold world. Now he slept peacefully in his mother's arms, tiny fists curled against his chest, dark hair already showing signs of his father's thickness. Darian entered quietly, moving with the ease of someone whose leg had healed completely. "How is he?" whispered. "Perfect. Beautiful. Ours." Eliza smiled. "He has your eyes." Poor child. But Darian was smiling as he gazed down at his son. "Storm gray and judgmental already. He'll grow into them." Darian wrapped his arms around them both, creating a circle of warmth against the winter chill. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering Ravenscar Manor in a blanket of white. The repairs to the West Wing were complete. The gardens had been replanted. The house that had once felt like a tomb now rang with life. Servants singing in the halls, children from the village coming for lessons Eliza had started teaching, friends visiting regularly. The Duke of Ravenscar was no longer the most feared man in England. He'd become something more dangerous to his enemies and more valuable to his friends. A man of honor who protected his own, fought for justice, and loved his family with the intensity he'd once reserved for building walls. "Do you ever think about it?" Eliza asked softly. "Everything we went through to get here?" "Every day. I think about the fire, the attacks, the moment I almost lost you." Darian's arms tightened slightly. And I'm grateful, because all of it led to this. You're grateful someone tried to kill you multiple times? I'm grateful that in the crucible of all that chaos and danger, I found something I never thought I'd have, a reason to tear down the walls, a reason to fight not just for survival, but for a future worth living. He kissed the top of her head, then the baby's. You saved me, Eliza. Not from the fire or Cordelia or the lies. You saved me from myself. From the half-life I'd resigned myself to living. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost. Hope. Eliza looked up at him, seeing not the cold Duke she'd married out of duty, but the man she'd chosen to love. The man who'd learned to love her back. We saved each other, she said. That's what partners do. Below, in the entrance hall, they could hear Mary directing servants as they prepared for the day. Mrs. Graves was probably already in the kitchen, organizing meals with her usual military precision. Harrison would be checking that all the rooms were properly heated. The household that had once run on fear now operated on mutual respect and genuine care. In the village, people were beginning to gather for the winter market, a tradition Eliza had revived. The tavern keeper who'd once hosted Josephine's lies now spoke proudly of the Duke and Duchess who'd brought prosperity and justice to Ravenscar. Children played in streets that had once fallen silent when the Blackthorn carriage passed. Catherine Ashford had returned from her travels with stories of Italy and France, and was now living in a cottage on the edge of the estate, writing a book about women who'd survived trauma and rebuilt their lives. She visited weekly, had become Eliza's closest friend, and served as Thomas's godmother. Lord Ashford remained in prison, but Catherine had begun writing to him, slow, careful letters working toward forgiveness. Not for his sake, she'd told Eliza, but for her own. She refused to let bitterness poison the rest of her life. Cordelia Sterling had disappeared into the prison system, and Eliza rarely thought of her anymore. The woman who'd tried to destroy them had become nothing more than a cautionary tale, a footnote in the Blackthorn family history. "What are you thinking?" Darian asked, watching Eliza's expression. "That we turned a legacy of violence and fear into something beautiful. Your father built walls and ruled through terror. You're tearing those walls down and building bridges instead." She looked down at Thomas, who'd started to wake, his tiny face scrunching up. "And this little one will grow up knowing only love. He'll never have to hide who he is or build armor to survive. He'll be free in a way you never were." Darian's eyes shimmered with tears he no longer tried to hide. "That's all I want. For him to have the childhood I never did. To grow up knowing he's safe, loved, valued for who he is rather than what he represents. He will. We'll make sure of it." Thomas began to cry, and Eliza shifted him to nurse. Darian watched them with an expression of such profound tenderness that it made Eliza's heart ache. "I never knew I could feel this much," he said quietly. "For years I thought I was broken, incapable of connection, doomed to repeat my father's patterns. But then you walked into my life and proved me wrong about everything. You weren't broken. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how." Eliza reached out and took his hand. "But you don't need those protections anymore. You have us now." "I have everything now." He squeezed her hand. "A wife who challenges me, a son to raise, a household that's become a family, a community that's learning to trust again. 5 years ago, I would have called this impossible, a fantasy. And now? Now it's my reality, the only reality I want." They stood together in the tower room as the snow continued to fall, 3 people bound by love and the determination to create something better than what had come before. The man once known as the Devil Duke had become a devoted husband and father. The girl sold into marriage to save her family had become a duchess who commanded respect through courage rather than title, and their son would grow up in a world transformed by the choices his parents made. Ravenscar Manor stood strong against the winter wind, no longer a fortress designed to keep the world out, but a home that welcomed people in. The dark legend that had shrouded it for generations had been replaced with something gentler, but no less powerful. A story of love overcoming fear, truth defeating lies, and 2 people who refused to let the past destroy their future. In the village, the innkeeper was already telling the tale to travelers, how the cursed Duke found redemption through the love of a brave young woman. How they'd fought enemies together and won, how they'd transformed a house of shadows into a beacon of hope. The story would grow in the telling, as stories do. Facts would blur into legend, details would change, but the heart of it would remain true. That sometimes the monsters we fear are just people in pain, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is see past the armor to the soul beneath. Years from now, when Thomas was grown with children of his own, he would tell them about his parents, about the grandfather he'd never met who'd terrorized the countryside, and the grandmother who'd died defending herself, about the grandmother Cordelia who'd let obsession destroy her, and the Uncle Richard who'd chosen greed over family. But mostly, he would tell them about Darian and Eliza, about two people who'd started as strangers, became partners, and ultimately transformed not just their own lives, but an entire community. He would tell them that legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you build, one choice at a time. And as the snow fell on Ravenscar Manor that winter morning, with a new father holding his sleeping son and his wife by his side, a new legacy was already being written, not in blood and fear, but in love, courage, and the unshakable belief that the future could be better than the past, if you were brave enough to fight for it.